So I just want to say I'm so excited to be here, and to Bill too, and Kelly, to have this conversation with you all over the next hour plus on this kind of interesting topic, I think, about self-love and personal worthiness. And one of the neat things about an audience like this is that I think what we get to do is we get to try new concepts. Now, my two colleagues that spoke before me were so amazing. Your presentations are amazing, and you had so many slides, and you'd really thought through this. I'm coming at this a little differently, and I hope that we'll have, and I'm going to make time for your thoughts and input and reaction to this topic, because I'm just really kind of throwing out to you kind of what I have been thinking about, seeing, feeling with people, organizations, leaders over the particularly last 8 years, but I would say my whole career, and has kind of taken me to this place to be ready to have this conversation with you all today. And I'm so passionate about it because I see the need for us to think about self-love and self-care and self-value and self-acceptance in a whole new way. So I want to just start off to say that I have been, my whole life, since the time I think I could, recognize my parents, have always been curious. So like Chip was saying, just a really curious person. But I was always really curious about why people do what they do. And why was it that, when I was growing up down the street, we'd want to go to a neighbor's home because their dad was really cool, but we wouldn't want to go to another home because their dad wasn't that cool. And when I was growing up, my parents, by the way, met here in Madison, Wisconsin. And they went to the University of Wisconsin here. My mother was the number one Latin student in Illinois, and she skipped a grade, and she came to Madison as a 17-year-old freshman. My father was a fifth-year senior. And so we always say kind of dad, like, you loser, right? And so they met, and of course, as what women did in the late 50s, was my brilliant mother dropped out of university here and married my father 2 weeks before her 19th birthday. And then, he was in the Navy, and her life changed, and she found herself at 23 with a 2-year-old, me, a 1-year-old, my sister Dee Dee, and a newborn, my sister Jo. And so my mother then, when I was a teenager in the Gloria Steinem years, my mother went back to school, finished her degree, got her master's in psychology, and taught women's reentry programs, and that kind of inspired my interest in women's issues. I have a special interest in that. But I have a daughter, and her name is Madison. So we named her after Madison. So there's this lineage. Anyway, so it's really great to be here in Wisconsin. So my father my parents now live in Racine, Wisconsin. My father is a very dutiful Catholic. And when we were growing up, this is, and the reason I'm telling you this is because it has to do with my curiosity, okay? So growing up, if you were a Myers, you were Catholic, and you went to church on Sundays. And that's just the way it was. And there wasn't a lot of discussion about why or how, or it was just at this time every Sunday, the car is leaving, and you better be in it or else. Now, my youngest sister at the time was always late, and she was always doing stuff with her hair and crazy pigtails, and she's now a makeup artist in Hollywood, okay? So there was always crying, screaming, crazy, getting in the car to go to church. And then we would go to church, and then it was that sometimes Catholics like screeching out of to get home. Yeah. And so when I was 10, I couldn't take it anymore. And I pulled my dad aside and I go, Dad, I just don't get this. And I don't think whatever you're trying to do in your leadership, it's not working for you, right? Anyways, but down the street was our friends, the Dohertys, and they had 4 kids. And they did a little bit different, because what he did, and this is what I was observing as a kid, right? What he was doing was, hey, we're Dohertys, we go to church, it's super cool. Those of you who are in the car by X get to come with us. And we go to Mass, and then we go to our favorite pancake house. And we talk about the sermon, and we talk about love, and we talk about being together as a family. Now, in the end, what was both of those dads trying to do? What were each of those dads trying to do from a leadership standpoint? Any thoughts?
Teach you how to be good citizens.
All of that's true. But at the end, the bigger goal is to raise lifelong Catholics. Right? Leadership's about getting results. So the Myers girls, guess how many of us are practicing Catholics? 0. Guess how many of the Dohertys are practicing Catholics?
4.
All 4 of them. Anyways, that's an example of my curiosity. Now, I am spiritual. My one sister isn't sure. The other sister is, what's the religion close to Catholic? Episcopal. That's what she is. And I'm spiritual. Okay. So anyways, but that's my point. So that's what I've been looking at my whole life, right? This with this curiosity. And really curious about that. Leadership gets results, whatever it is it means to you. Whether it is starting a new business, having a conference every year, being a great parent or spouse or sister or friend. Whatever means something to you, how do you get those results? And it's changed. What got the results in the past doesn't so much work today. And so part of that, too, is as I was going along my journey, the thing that fascinated me the most was the journey of self. The journey of the self. And when I was at the Kennedy School, and I had the honor to be the executive director of our Center for Public Leadership, the Kennedy School, my partner in crime was David Gergen, some of you know him, and Warren Bennis was the chairman of our board. Yes. And I had not a day, I don't miss him, he passed away, it gets me choked up, a year and a half ago. But anyways, Warren Bennis. Did you know Warren? Oh, you didn't? Oh my God, he would have loved you. But Warren was the first one who came from a academic standpoint and said leadership is self-knowledge. 25 years ago, he was the first one to say leadership is self-knowledge when we really know who we are. And what was interesting at the Kennedy School is that people that go to the Kennedy School go there because they want to make the world better. And they want to, they're public servants through government, nonprofit, business too. They want to make the world better. And one of the things they were so craving is, and you would see, I went to the Kennedy School after my Clinton days to get my master's. And one of the things I was taken with was how many of my classmates had multiple masters and PhDs. Like, you're here for your second PhD, right? Why do you need more than one? In fact, why do you need one, right? So, but anyways, because they were craving, it wasn't just the classes on economics or the classes on leadership. There was this hunger for who am I? Who am I? And through all of our focus groups and talking to students, they were saying, I have 2 degrees, but I keep running into the same problems with my boss. I don't really handle conflict well. I kind of learned to scream when I was a kid, and I scream at my staff. Or I freak out when I'm really stressed. And they were so hungry. So we created the Center for Public Leadership. We created Know Thyself. What is getting in your way? Who are you? What are the pearls of wisdom you're going to be contributing to the world? But as important is who are you? And what are the behaviors that get in your way? And what are those? And so that's what I've really had an amazing fascination on. And then in 2009, I got a book deal with Simon & Schuster, my book called Take the Lead. And I had just come off the Obama campaign. So I was the chief operating officer for Barack Obama's first presidential campaign. And it was super interesting, and I went towards him because we'd been studying his leadership at the Center for Public Leadership. And I was super, super curious about if he really is a collaborator, communicator, relationship builder, and he's my age, and he's black, multiracial, multicultural. God, what would that look like? And so I really went towards him to observe that, and I was so taken. I spent 1 year as his chief operating officer. So I was one of the first people hired, put all the details of the operations together. And then the second year I traveled the country as a chief surrogate, telling the story of his leadership and the kind of campaign we ran. And it was in that second year that I got the incredible beauty of that campaign. And I always thought, and I think probably not in this room, it's kind of a delight actually, you aren't all Obama haters in this room, right? But a lot of places I go, literally companies will say, I think we won't put that on your resume because he's so unpopular. But I would always say, I don't care how you feel about Barack Obama, and history will tell his story, but you also cannot deny, or at least you should be curious, how did this no-name, weird name, 2-year US Senator who had 10% name recognition in the country go on to be the first black president of the United States? Isn't that at least worthy of some curiosity? So when I came off, I decided not to go into the Obama administration. I have a daughter who was then 6. And the campaign was, I actually was one of the people that didn't think he could win. So I thought, this campaign will just go on till New Hampshire, and then I'll be home, right? And he kept winning. And I was one of those people tired in the hotel room going, he's winning on the primary. I'm like, shit, he's winning. I just want to go home, So, but when I came off the campaign, my friend Spencer Johnson, who I met through Warren Bennis, he wrote the book Who Moved My Cheese? And I'm so jealous of him. I just spent a day with him in New Hampshire. Do you know that book, Who Moved My Cheese? For all us authors out there trying to put our words in the world, he's sold 43 million copies of Who Moved My Cheese. He's like the 4th grossing author of all times. And this is a total aside, okay, but his formula for writing books, which is kind of what I'm doing here, and I'll get into this, the meat of what I'm trying to talk about here, but he does this thing where he writes his books and he does giant focus groups on his book, and he gets feedback, constant feedback on his books, like he did with Who Moved My Cheese. And what he's learned, and this is for any of you budding authors out there, or those of us who want to write the next books, what he's learned, and he says it is absolutely 100%, 100%, if you do this, you'll win. In your focus group, when he gives the manuscript, so you've all read this, you're sitting here, you've all read my manuscript, and at the end of the conversation, when I say, how many of you, or someone would get out, Bill would say, okay, how many of you want to buy Betsy's manuscript? And if people in the audience are like, I'm buying the manuscript, I want 5 copies, you have a winner. If instead people say, no, we'll just buy it when it comes out. We'll get it when you don't have a winner, right? So that's why we got to keep trying out these ideas. So my point is that when I came off Obama, I got this book deal. And the book, Simon & Schuster kind of said, Betsy, when do you think leadership works? You've been in some places, but you're also a mom. Like, when did it work, when didn't it work? And that was the journey of my book, Take the Lead. And so I kind of looked at all the different places I'd been, the different experiences. What was it about Bill Clinton where we were all so motivated? What was it? And when was I most motivated? When were people around me most motivated? When were they weren't as motivated? And what my book is saying is that leadership creates a feeling. It's a really different way to think. Because I kept saying, there's so many leadership authors, mostly men, by the way. So what am I saying that's different? What's my stake in the ground on leadership? And if you think about it, you really step back and go, we're human. What makes us human? Our emotions. And when are we most productive? And what's going on in our lives? And when we are most motivated, productive are those times when we're surrounded with people who make us feel appreciated, valued, thanked, heard. And at the same time, we are dealing with a workforce that is 70% disengaged. When I first started writing my book, I was like, how can that be? That 70% of American workers are disengaged in the workplace. Wow, what's going on? So the statistics, and by the way, I was telling someone that I feel like I've had an 8-year giant focus group, because when I came off the Obama campaign and I decided not to go into the administration, all my colleagues, I was the only person minus David Plouffe, our campaign manager, who took like a 3-month hiatus because his daughter was born right after the election. So I started getting a lot of his speech rejects that he wasn't taking, and started getting out. And then it just started my speaking in my book. And so I've been in so many companies, from everything from Starbucks, Southwest Airlines, DuPont, Procter & Gamble, Guardian Life Insurance, Farmers Life Insurance. I could name many, many companies of all different industries. And the 3 things that companies are grappling with today, and it's been the same over the last, I think, couple decades. 1, worker disengagement and unhappiness. 2, we have all these incredible women. And why are we, in 2016, having the same conversation we had in the middle of the Clinton years? I mean, I have to laugh sometimes, and I go, yeah, I worked in the Clinton White House 20 years ago, right? So that better not be the highlight of my life 20 years ago. But it's the same conversation we're having. Why is it in corporate America, the top 10%, that women have only 10% of women are at the top echelon in the C-suites? EVP, VP, SVP, and on the board. And why? What's going on? And then millennials. We have this whole new generation. And the funniest thing about millennials is that companies keep saying, they talk about millennials like they're coming. And it's like, no. The millennials are here, man. And the oldest one just turned 36. They're not coming. They're here. And the Generation Z just went to college this year. So now we're trying, and they've never not known life without technology. So millennials, what's so interesting about millennials is they're gender neutral. So what the young men want and the young women want is the same. And they want to live an integrated life. They don't have to hide themselves. And they want a purpose-driven life. And they don't want to have to hide who they are in the organization. And they're very accepting of other people. I was at a conference recently when a CEO got up and said, don't we all want to be a millennial? Right? And another CEO shared a story how he's probably late 50s, 60-ish, and he said, I have 28-year-old twin girls. And I won't say the company, but he's head of all the Americas for a huge technology company based in Boston. And he said, not one time in their entire childhood was I able, or did I choose to take them to school on their first day. And now they're 28, and I'm really sorry about it. Now, the young people in the audience, that, when I was growing up, that's a badge of honor, man. Look at me. I'm so busy. I'm so important. I'm so needed. I never could take my kid to school on her first day of the school year. Today, young people hear that, and they go, I don't want to work for your company. If that's how you have to be a CEO, if that's how you get to the C-suite, not interested. We see that all the time at Bentley University. Bentley's a business university in Massachusetts. Kids go there because they want to be accountants, finance, marketing, insurance. They look up there and they go, no, I'm not doing that. Right? It's fascinating. So companies are like, so I've been sitting, and at Bentley, we did a corporate challenge with our governor 2 years ago, Governor Deval Patrick, very cool governor, very popular, asked Bentley and our Center for Women in Business if we would do a governor's corporate challenge. And he kicked it off. It's a model for the country. Utah's done it. I was about to do it. Basically, where they get the corporations to say, we will take the challenge and we will work to get more women in senior roles. And we'll take one of the 5 challenges, more women in the C-suites, better retention, more women on our board. And so we ended up getting 117 companies in the Massachusetts area that took this challenge. So over the last couple of years, I just left Bentley at the end of December to work on my own second book and business. But over the last couple of years, I've had the very interesting and good fortune to work with 100 plus CEOs and companies who want to do this challenge. And what's really interesting is that nobody has this figured out. And one of the things that was really cool about all this, I think, is that in the past, it was kind of like, well, we don't have it figured out, but we're not going to tell anybody. And now there's kind of like this desperation, and you'll see competitor banks, what are you guys doing? Because we don't have, they'll get together in the room, and the one thing they love is peer exchanges. Tell me what you're doing, because we haven't figured this out. And CEOs will tell you talent is their number one issue. We did a roundtable in Philadelphia with the CEO of Pricewaterhouse a couple years ago. And we had 15 top CEOs, and the conversation was on how do we do a better job of getting more women in senior roles. But one of the questions I had, just curious, because it's always occurred to me, there's been all kinds of research and studies that show companies that have more women in senior roles are more profitable. Proof. Like 30% more profitable. Like really worth you doing. So I said to the CEOs, I just have to ask this question. Do you guys, you know this data that's been out there for a long time? Do you buy it? And there's like this awkward silence, right? And one of the CEOs, who was a CEO of a big financial company, he goes, well, it's not that we don't buy it. It's just not a motivator. Well, what's a motivator for today in today's world? And they all agreed, and I would say this is absolutely agreed with all the CEOs, with the challenge companies, talent. And they basically said talent today comes in very different size, color, shapes than it did in the past. And we, as a shepherd of our companies that are looking at legacy, what's our legacy going to be? We want to leave our company with a modern workforce for the modern world and the modern customer. And how do we do that? And oh, by the way, we're really competitive with each other. I want the best talent. But recruiting talent is just half the equation. The big part is the retention. And I've done a lot of work with insurance companies, okay, that are trying to recruit women, but also men. And they do a great job of recruiting, tell the story. They get in, they last a minute. And what it costs companies, Farmers Insurance, one of the companies I did a lot of work with, they were talking about how they would recruit, and this is very typical. They would recruit young people, and in the first year they lose almost 30%. And by the third or fourth year, they've lost over 50%. And it costs them like $150,000 a person. So these companies are going, what's going on? And so that's what I've been, in these companies, have been so curious about, which is, and we're spending billions of dollars in the leadership development field. There's a lot of people like me who do this work and get paid pretty well for it. We're not making much. Sometimes I think we leadership people should get together. It's kind of embarrassing, right? Because it's like we're going into these companies, we're paid a lot of money, and we've written books, and we're cool people, and we got 70% disengagement, and we're not moving the numbers for women. So, and then, on top of it, people are suffering. Oh my God, the suffering. When I go into these buildings to do work with various companies, I was just in Boston, I've been doing some work with Fidelity, some other companies, and you go in those elevators. I hate those elevators. Do you know what I mean? And they go up to the 30. You have awesome space here, by the way. If only CEOs could be like you. But you go, and it's so interesting. If you get off your BlackBerry or your cell phone, and you go in these elevators, like it's depressing. Like you get in the elevator happy, and you get out the 30th floor, you want to kill yourself, right? And you're going up the elevator, and people are like, oh, how are you? Horrible. How many more days till Friday? And they're all on their BlackBerries like that. And it's like, if you listen to those conversations, like, what's going on? And, also, I think for me, doing work with these companies, but also at the conferences I go to, and when you do book signings, wow, people tell you stuff, you know, and I was really taken when my book first came out in 2011, and so I did tons of book signings, and I did, for some reason, Simon & Schuster got me in all these tech companies, so I was in the Bay Area a lot, and so particularly women would come up to me, and every book signing, I had 3 or 4 women crying. I'm so unhappy. I can't stand it here. They're so mean. You know, I'm just so miserable. So I've been kind of tracking this, you know? Another girlfriend of mine just wrote Milan Verveer worked with, was Hillary's chief of staff in the Clinton White House, and she and her, another woman just wrote a women's leadership book. I'm forgetting the name right now. Excuse me. But I just saw them after they did a 10-city tour. And there was an event for their book at the Kennedy Library. So I went to them, I said, hey, you guys, you just did 10 cities. What's the biggest thing you picked up? And they both said, the suffering inside the working world. The suffering. So here's my curiosity. It ain't working. And how do we rethink? How do we rethink? And how do we create the modern workplace? Or it appears that the modern workplace isn't colliding properly with the modern worker. Like there's a lot of effort and there's a lot of good people that are working on this. And there's great companies like Southwest. I've had the good fortune to work with Southwest. And yes, they're one of the companies that are talking about love. They've been doing it for 40 years. And in their engagement studies, the last engagement study, 92% of Southwest employees said they'd go the extra mile for their company. So their example, now they have a people department, and their people department tracks their 30,000 people. But when good things are happening, babies, marriages, people running marathons and all that, but also when sad things are happening. And they do it a little different. And my friend Elizabeth runs all their new leadership university there. So she's always calling me with stories. But it's one of the stories that and so some of you may have heard me tell this, but this is such a great example. One of their middle managers, his wife, this was about 4 years ago, was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer. And it was not going to turn out well. And they basically said, and they had 4 kids under the age of 10. And they basically 2 years max. So the people department heard about it. And they went to him and said, what do you need? We are here for you. And he told them in the course of that conversation that they were planning a 20-year anniversary to Italy, but they hadn't saved enough money. So they took up a collection across Southwest and raised the money and sent them to Italy. And when she passed away, they were there. You know, what do you need? He's still with the company. That's what they do. That's what they do. So I started to look at what is it that we're teaching, and what is why are we so unhappy? And there's and I love putting up that Harvard Business Review happiness. So, I had that 4 years ago. I read every article 15 times, right? And yeah, we're all in the pursuit of it. But the interesting thing about the happiness, the biggest takeaway from that all those articles for me, was that we think happiness is going to be when we finally get that 3rd kid, or first grandchild, or promotion, or we finally go on that trip to Italy, or we finally get whatever it is we think and what those articles are saying is, no, it's actually the walk with my wife around the pond, the coffee with my best friend, the laying in bed with my daughter and 2 dogs. That's happiness for me, right? And I woke up the other night, my daughter and one of my dogs were cuddling, and I took a picture of it. I almost was in tears. This is love. My kid and my dog cuddled up, pure love, man, right? So I don't know what else we need, but that's kind of what happiness. So I've been going down this road of like, and what are we teaching the right things? And I've been on my own journey of what, when you step back and you go, well, who am I? Who are we? For so long when someone asked me, let me tell, who are you, Betsy? Well, I worked for President Clinton. I was a senior advisor. And I worked for Obama. And I'm a mom. But if you peel back the onion, so what? Okay, that makes me a little interesting. But I worked for Clinton 20 years ago. I know I keep saying that, but it's like, is that you know what I mean? Like, is that who I am? Who am I really? Who is Betsy? And we all go on this journey, right? So in the midst of this, I started to read Viktor Frankl, that Man's Search of Meaning. So I apologize for having some notes, because I'm playing around with a lot of this, so I hope you forgive me. As a speaker, there's nothing worse. But so in my own quest, so I started to read this, and what's so amazing when you think about the suffering, right? So his whole work is that, his argument is that the quest for meaning, the quest for our meaning in life is the key to mental health and human flourishing, right? So the meaning. So it's kind of when I started to think about, well, any title that I've had, any job that I've had, is it tied to the meaning of my life, right? Because when I worked for President Clinton, we were working on poverty and breast cancer and domestic violence eradication and all the things. That was the meaning of my life. It's not the title I had. It's what took me to that job. It's what got me up every day, right? But so he talks about the gap between what one is and what one should become. And the idea, and here's the key part, that man is responsible and must actualize the potential meaning of his life. So the key part of leadership is the leader in me. You would be surprised at how many people, particularly women, when I speak to a lot of women's conferences, and I'll ask this question, how many of you in this room are a leader? How many in this room do you think you're a leader? Raise your hand. Okay, some of you don't have your hand raised. I don't know if you're sleeping or you're... I see everything. No. But I always say to people, look, at the very least, you're leading your own life. Nobody forced any of us to be here in this room, even though we like you a lot. Nobody forces you to show up the way you show up, dress the way you do, treat people the way you do, deal with stress the way you do, right? All of us are on our own journey. But so his question remains so relevant today as it did 50 years ago. And why do some people find themselves so empty? And it's a question of attitude. This is him that one takes toward life's challenges and opportunities. That each of our approaches to everything in our life, from life-threatening challenges to everyday situation, helps shape the meaning of our lives. A human being is not one thing among others. Things determine each other. But a man is actually self-determining. What he becomes within the limits of endowment and environment he has made of himself. So then we have to ask, why do we all feel so unlovable and unworthy? I mean, a lot of us, if we really sat down and had a heart to heart, we would admit, I kind of do. And why? And what does loving me actually mean? I was sitting in January and I was thinking, what is self-love? What is that really anyways? What is self-love? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Self-love, self-acceptance, self-value, worthiness. What are those things? And do they matter? And what are the beliefs we have about ourselves that we made into truths? Right? A belief is just a thought I keep thinking. But where did I get it? So my 10-year-old, my daughter, who's now almost 14, when she was 10, she applied for a private school, and I was sitting in the meeting, and they said to her, Maddie, it's so great here. We have this great choir and a great singing program, music program. And Maddie, honest to God, she goes, I don't sing. I can't sing. I was like, what? You're 10, right? So we get in the car and I go, honey, why did you say that you can't sing? She goes, Mom, because when I was 5, when I was 5, I was on the playground and remember my friend Kate? Well, I was singing and Kate said I had a terrible voice. So I said, wait a minute, 5 years later, you're carrying the fact that some kid on the park, who you don't even, they moved away, right? And you're believing it? Do you know she still believes it? So what are the beliefs we have about ourselves that we carry? And what's the meaning of my life? What's the purpose? Why am I here? And so then I started to think about if organizations understood this and they were able to create a purpose-driven culture, could they create happiness in the workplace? And what's our personal responsibility to this? Are we waiting for others to love us and create the environment? And what is the truth of my life that I don't see or don't want to see, and how is this tied to my beliefs and possibly feeling unlovable? So I'm going to use my slides. So when you think about those people that are happiest are those people who feel passionate about what they're contributing to the world. And so many people never get there. They never get there. And so how do we get to that core? Who are, when we ask those questions, who's Betsy? Who's Penny? Without your title, without being the, what are you calling yourself here?
The cruise director.
The cruise director. So Penny, without being the cruise director, who is she? Who's Bill? Who's Kelly? Who are we? What's the contribution we're adding to the world? What is that? And why I think this matters, and why I think this is a leadership development issue, is that when you have people that work for you, that like themselves, that care for themselves, that feel valuable and worthy, then they are able to treat other people around them. If I love me, I can love you. If I value me, I can value you. Because what's happened is that the old model of leadership, which is an ego-driven model, ego is the opposite of love. Ego is one up. Ego is I win, you lose. I saw that a lot in Washington. A lot of good people, mind you, but there's an ego-ness that doesn't work. The new model of leadership is one that brings in the feminine, the love. Raj, you're going to hear about this tomorrow in your work. But ego is not a place of coming from love or self-worth or value. It's coming from ego. Ego, we make bad decisions when we're coming from ego. Not that a strong sense of self is bad, but when you're making decisions on me, not we. One of the beautiful things about the Obama campaign, when I look back to like one of the reasons that campaign worked so well, is one of the young field I asked her, she'd been in 3 different states, and I said, her name was Peachy. I said, Peachy, what made this campaign work? She said, because people came for Obama, but they stayed for each other. We became a we. We were a we. And that's, so when you think about how do we then translate this, what if you had an organization full of people who were clear about who they were, took care of themselves, and had a strong core being? And what if companies shifted the way they thought about leadership development to think about, okay, everyone who works for me, who's your core being? What's the contribution that you're making to the world, and does it align with our company? There are companies now that are recruiting on passion and core values. You can teach skills. You can't teach somebody to have a core if you don't have one. So who's your core, and what is your purpose, and what's your contribution? And then self-care, and all the things we do for self-care, I'm going to give you just some thoughts about that, takes you to your passion and purpose and joy. So if I were adding some things to the world of leadership development, and I started to think about how do we help people really tap into their personal worth and their self-love and self-care, talking about certain things like resilience. What's your resilience? Things happen to us. And, you know, there's been research on people that get to be 100 years old. And one of the traits that they have is they're resilient. Things happen to them, and they're able to say, you know what, I've lost my spouse, I've lost my children, whatever happened in life, but I still find life super exciting, and I have a reason. When I was out with my book, I went to Nigeria on a book tour, because the Young Presidents Organization had me go to a couple countries in Africa. And one of the things I was so taken with the entrepreneurs in Lagos, because the electricity keeps going off, the traffic's insane, the government's corrupt, like there's a lot of issues. So I'm sitting with all these entrepreneurs, and I said, like, what is it about you guys? And they go, we can see the opportunity through the chaos. And I think I was telling Kelly this last night, and then I was with another YPOer recently, and I was telling him this story, and he goes, no, us real entrepreneurs, we don't even see the chaos. Right? And I'm like, oh my God, that's such a great, I love that. And, you know, and so what is it about resilience? You know, I was at an event several years ago where Katie Couric got up, Avon Women of Enterprise Awards. They ding dong, Avon. They honor 5 women every year who've become successful entrepreneurs over difficult circumstances. And Katie Couric got up and said, everything went right in my life until I was 40 years old. Everything went right. And when I turned 40 or 42, I lost my husband to cancer. And she then made that colon cancer, right? Made it part of her purpose. And she went on and did a rectal, or what do you call those? Thank you, colonoscopy, which I just had one recently, so I've tuned it out, right? So I can't even think of the name of it. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. But anyways, so she went on and did that, you know, for the world to see. That's an example, right, of what is it about people when something happens to them with resilience, and can you teach that? Can you teach resilience? How we choose to see things and able to make meaning of things. Because there's always a storm. You know, there's always a storm in our life. And one of the things is, in the people who are teaching resilience, how do we handle resilience in the past when something happened to us? How do we handle that? And, you know, when I look at myself, you know, I have this memory of being in 8th grade. And when I was growing up, being a cheerleader was super, like, the coolest thing. Now, today, my daughter says nobody, you know, like, cheerleading is just not for, like, the cool kid. But when I was growing up, the cool kid was cheerleader. So I have this memory. It feels like it was yesterday. And I was kind of tall and gangly. I wasn't one of the cute little ones. I got through the boards, and then you had to go in front of the school, and you had to do a cheer, and the school voted on you. Like, see, I cringe now. It's like 40 years ago. And then what they would do is then there was like 10 of us that went in front of the school, and then they picked 7 or 6 or something. And then they posted the list, you know, like on the glass from the president's or the principal's office. And so everyone is, right, waiting, not just the girls who tried out, like the whole school. And yeah, I wasn't on the list, right? And so what do you do? So like, what do you do? Right? I didn't make it. So what I did is I ran for student government, and I won. So those are clues for all of us, right, about how you handle resilience. The other thing I just want to talk about, I know my time, is that 15 minutes till the whole thing's over? 30, okay, good. I hope you guys aren't bored, because I'm like having so much fun here. The other thing is about what I think people don't do is we don't feel our feelings. We do everything to not feel our feelings, because feelings are icky, right? And some of us have this thing, I have a feeling, I need to act on it. I have a feeling, I'm pissed at you, I'm going to write this bad email, and I'm going to send it. That's what I mean, right? This is why it translates into the work world. And you say, oh my God, whatever's happening in our lives, because we all have stuff, right? And you say, oh my God, oh, how it hurts. Oh man, this hurts. And how do we learn to comfort ourselves in the midst of our greatest pain? It seems to me that actually how we stay with our pain is what leads to our healing, right? Like stay with our pain. And sometimes, that feeling when you're trying to get through something, pain, and it feels like you have 40-pound blocks of cement on your ankles, and you're wading through mud, is so painful. But why do we have so much resistance to our pain, and we do anything to avoid it, and anything not to feel to avoid the truth? But relief comes not so much, maybe, from reacting, but from choosing to observe our thoughts, and by observing without reaction, to begin to understand our patterns, and most importantly, our beliefs about ourselves. And so when you talk to people about this, it's like, yeah, I don't want to feel my feelings. I drink. Do you know the incidence of women in alcohol? It's working women drinking. There's a book out called Drink that I highly recommend. It is fascinating because the stress, right, of just trying to do everything to everybody. And for some reason, we think we never stop running for homecoming queen, So it's like, am I good enough now? I'm doing all these things. Do you love me now, right? And so the pain of it, and so the book Drink talks about how we start with 1 glass of Chardonnay, and then it's 2, then it's 3, then it's a bottle. Anyways, it's very interesting. But that's an example of I don't want to feel my pain. I don't want to deal with my feelings. So whatever we do, we overwork, we overcontrol, we overeat, whatever it is that we all do to avoid those feelings. What about if we talked about this stuff? I've been talking about this stuff with women particularly. Although men, you guys are in on this too. But particularly you get with a room of all women, and they're like, yeah, I don't want to feel my feelings. It hurts too bad. So what if we started to talk about that? Because all of this is what, if we can get this, and this leads to our personal worth of how do I deal with my feelings, and it's okay I don't react. And I always say, that feeling you have, you're so mad at your boss, you're so mad, and you want to do something about it, and you sleep on it, and 24 hours later you're like, what was I overreacting about? You know what, that wasn't so bad. Maybe I need to think through why I'm reacting to that, whatever it is. And so it's just to step back and say, learning to sit with those feelings and observe and not judge. So the other thing is when we think about happiness, right? There's a woman that I'm doing some work with. Her name's Natalie Krogan. She's new. She's about to come out with a book on happiness. But what I love about her work is that she says happiness is not the avoidance of negative emotions. I want to say that again. Happiness is not the avoidance of negative emotions. There is a purpose to our storms and suffering. Suffering is the sandpaper to genuine happiness because it allows us to confront the truth and accept how things really are, not what you think they should be. And from here, the truth, now what? Now what? I always say to people, it doesn't matter if you like your boss or a colleague at work. how do you succeed in the environment of which you're in? Right? It's okay that you don't like your boss, but how do I succeed in that environment? Right? Because we all think, well, I have to love my boss to be happy. No, you don't. Right? This is the stuff I think we need to talk about. Right? And the other thing is, I love this quote from Esther Hicks. Does anyone know Esther Hicks? I follow her work, but I love this because here's the key thing of all of it. It's a quote that she said, this is the blame game, okay? We're always blaming people in the environment for doing something to us. What others are doing around you seems very important when you have not found your own steadiness. You want to say, hey, don't rock my boat. Because if you rock my boat, I can't be steady. The truth is, you are the only boat rocker in the world. Only you can rock your boat. This is what we're talking about when you're talking about self-care and self-value. Because if everybody has the ability to rock your boat, you're like a ping pong. And part of this, too, is how you develop safety, your personal safety. And what I want to say about that is that if you have control of your boat, then you have more control about, and you know what your purpose and your passion is. What am I here for? What am I in this organization for? What's my purpose? What am I doing in my life? And I'm listening to myself through my feelings. I'm challenging my beliefs. I'm taking care of myself. Then you can say, because so many people feel like a victim. Everything's coming at me. I'm living an inbox life. Most people will tell you that. When I go to any company, say, what's the first thing you do in the morning? It's the first thing you do when you go to your office.
Check your inbox.
Check, yeah. And then you sit there for how long? And we get lost, right? And then you pull your head up, oh my God, I'm hungry. And then go to lunch. And you have maybe a couple meetings, and you go back to your office and you get on your email again. And you just feel like I'm just responding to everybody's need, everybody's request, everybody's meeting. And when you're clear about your purpose and what you're doing, then you say, okay, do I need to respond to every email? What are the A's in my life? What are the A's that I need to do today? Because I'm clear about who I am. I'm not trying to please everyone. I'm clear about who I am and what needs to get done. So what are the A's that I need to do today? And what B is something you need to do, but maybe not right now. And C's and D's are things that maybe you want to do, but they're not necessary. Most people will tell you they are living in C's and D's. So if you're living in C's and D's, how do you get to purpose and passion and joy? You're living everybody else's life. And that goes for who gets in your life. Who gets on your calendar? Who gets on your calendar? I developed this whole a seminar on just calendar and relationships with MetLife, senior 40 top women. These were women making over $400,000, and they were exhausted. They were ragged. Because they were high producers, but they were doing everything for everybody else too. So when you start to unpeel the onion, if you really know what's my purpose in this organization, in my life, and what's the activity that I'm doing to move that forward. And then, I always say to anybody, you want to know what your purpose and passion is? Look at your calendar. How have you spent the last month? I always laugh. Like for the last 2 years, I've been saying I'm writing. Someone asked me, I'm writing my second book. And then a friend of mine called bullshit on me. She's like, you're not writing your second book. You haven't written one word. And I was like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Amy.
It was Amy.
Amy. So we have a common friend. You have to have a bullshit detector in your life. But if you look at my calendar and you go, over the last 2 years, I'm telling you I'm writing a book, but I haven't spent 1 minute have I reserved on my calendar to write my book. I'm not writing my book. Now, right now I am. I've been writing my book, and I have time on my calendar to prove it to myself, because that's all that matters, right? So that's what I'm talking about. Relationships. Everything we get done in our life is through relationships. How are you nurturing those relationships? Do you get along? You know, one of the things I'm fascinated about the presidential campaign, why has not one question ever been to one of these candidates, oh, by the way, Mr. Candidate or Miss Candidate, the president's remember for the legislation they get passed. What is your leadership strategy to work with people on the Hill? People you hate, people you fundamentally disagree with. What's your strategy, right? Everything we get done is with other people. How do you communicate? Nobody ever asked that, and I find that so fascinating. What's Obama going to be remembered for? Healthcare. What is Johnson remembered for? So why do we not talk about? Anyways, that's a little sidebar. So this is what I've been. This is the thing. And before we go up for questions, because I'd love to get some thoughts. This is what I think would just be incredible: is more organizations. And there are organizations going down this road where organizational mission and personal purpose and passion are intertwined. An organization obviously takes the lead in what their purpose and passion, what their mission is about. But we, people that work in organizations, have to take the personal responsibility for what is my purpose and passion? How am I showing up? Do I want to be here, wherever it is? Does it align with the organization? You take control back of your life. Do I want to be in this organization? Or wherever I am, don't I want to be one of the top 20% that's loving it and joyful? Or be part of the 70% that hangs their head at their desk all day long and sits there and just takes a paycheck? So there are companies now going in this direction, is how do we align our mission with our people's purpose and passion? And when you have that you start to have magic. And so the hiring practices are starting to look at some of the hiring practices. How do we get people in who are full of purpose and passion and love and excitement? We'll teach you the skills about our business, but you have the fundamental core of what you're trying to do in your life. And it completely puts power back in your life. A woman at a conference I was at, she raised her hand and she said, I want you to know, she was in her late 30s, she said, I've had an interesting career, but it's never been on my purpose and my passion. I just, whatever job kind of comes my way, I kind of take it. But when you know who your core is and you know what your passion is, every job I've ever gone to has had something to do with leadership, women, right? So it's kind of like you kind of know what's the contribution you're making in the world. She said, I just feel like I've had some interesting jobs that never really been that happy because these jobs aren't really on my purpose. They aren't the pearl of wisdom that I'm adding to the world. So that's why I'm thinking, how do we create a happier workplace with people who are filled with more understanding of themselves and show up in a way that they're able to align their purpose and passion with the organization and treat the people around them in a better way? Because the number one reason why people leave, I think Chip said it today, the number one reason why people leave a organization is their boss. And so how do we think differently about how we train our managers and leaders in our organizations to love and support and nurture the people around them? But part of that is to help your people find their real purpose and passion and support them in their journey for self-love and self-care and talking about some of these things that are not easy to talk about. Feelings, vulnerability, your beliefs about yourself, right? And all of this then creates safety in an organization where I can be me. So at that, does anyone have any thoughts? Agree, disagree? Yes. Oh.
Hi. It seems like the time to start this process is before the job search happens.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering who these educators or mentors are and where they would come from to start facilitating this kind of a transformation.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because you then have to have a whole different philosophy, right, in your hiring practices about what you're looking for.
But I'm also thinking, trying to prepare the people, preparing students, I think a lot of those habits, these personal habits, develop from childhood.
Yes.
You know, like the inability to sing.
Yes.
And so,
right.
you know, kind of, it seems like it's a little late in the process, or it's later in the process perhaps than maybe ideal by looking at it inside the corporation.
Yes.
And
yes.
that, in fact, kind of going back further, there might be some benefits there. And how does that happen?
You know, it's interesting because I have thought that this stuff these conversations should happen in schools at the earliest levels. Right. I mean, I saw at Bentley all the time, right? So Bentley's a school, like I said, people come there to be accountants, right? And there are a handful every year of students who go there because their mom was an accountant. And for the last couple of years, I would sit with some of the students, and I would say, it's okay if you get here and this isn't for you. And that's where part of this, and one woman in particular, she said, she was sitting in a conversation, a class with me, and she said, I can't fail, and I'm failing my accounting. And I said, yeah, you can, and actually it's great information. And then I went to the University of San Diego, business major, and I was not a good accountant. And I have memories, like losing cheerleader, of getting a D on my accounting 3 midterm or something, and sitting on the steps of the business school crying. And I share that story with them because I'm like, you know what? At the time, I thought it was bad, but now it was great information about myself because Betsy Myers isn't going to be an accountant. That's not my skill set on any level. So that's just good data for you, right? And so part of that's a feeling, right? I have a feeling, I'm attaching bad or good to that feeling instead of sitting with it. And if we could teach this at the earliest levels, would absolutely. Nobody talks about this stuff. There's some interesting, a few books, like Sean Covey wrote a book, The 7 Habits of Happy Kids. And my daughter had a teacher who taught that in 2nd grade. And that was like cutting edge for that school district. You know, and it's a very simple book, but it's starting to think about how you take the power, learning about who you are, right? How you take the power of your life, and because so many people are seeking approval. They live their lives seeking approval from everyone around them, and they don't ever get the approval of themselves. That's why I'm so fascinated with the whole this part, right? It's like everything I do, I'm trying to get your approval. You know, and we run ourselves ragged trying to get everybody's approval. And so how we teach getting your own approval, you know? And so that, I don't have an answer for that, except that start to have some of this dialogue and maybe piloting some conversations in different academic settings when people are younger. And it's okay to be you, you know? And as parents, that's a different philosophy. Our children come through us, you know, to go out and give their own gifts into the world, you know? And it's just very complicated. You know, it's very complicated. But, you know, God, if we were to teach kids about what self-love, self-acceptance, self-value was, you know, and, you know, we all have had, so many of us have kids, and you see what they go through. I need to be like you. You know, everybody else is doing it, right? And so you start to have this epidemic of girls cutting. That's self-hatred. Right? Why do our children hate themselves at 14? You know, and so when you think about, you know, learning, because when you get clear about this, then you could get clear of that. You know, and this keeps you clean. It keeps you on your path. You know, and so having conversation, you know, about who our children are, what makes them happy, what makes their heart sing. Right? Go towards that. I mean, I have people all the time come up to me and go, I don't even know where to begin with joy. You know, and you think about how do you get to joy, right? Joy is when you feel so good about yourself. And listen, nobody feels so good every minute of every day. You feel so good and you're taking care of yourself and you're leading you to your passion and purpose and you're just joyful. And people say, I don't even know where to begin. And I go, well, go back to your earliest memories. What were you doing? You know that feeling in your stomach? Or you're just joyful? When was that? What were you doing? You know? So for me, when I think back, like one of my most joyful times was working for Bill Clinton. working on poverty and domestic violence and all those things. Like, when I think of those days, I have like, oh, that was mad joy for me. And then what were the times when you weren't as joyful? When I was going over spreadsheets in Chicago working for Obama. That was not joyful, all right? But working for Clinton was joyful. So those are things like that. We have to keep asking those questions, not whether I should be in this job because my mom wants me to be there. I mean, I had a guy work for me at Harvard when I was at the Center for Leadership, and he was our CFO. He turned 50, and he said, you know what? I really don't like this career. He goes, but my mother told me to get an accounting degree because I'd always have a job. He was a gay man who wanted to be in creative and graphic arts. And he was a CFO, and he hated it. And the truth was, he wasn't that good. Right? He really wasn't. So, like, we should be on a mission to make sure where we can help people, go towards their purpose and passion. How do we help people do that? And we have such a more joyful world. Anyways, I wish I had a better answer for you. Yeah. Yes?
Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
I'm Jody. I'm hospital chaplain, Unitarian minister. I teach on the spirituality of illness. So first of all, thank you for talking about the feminine principle. I think those for men and women alike are huge for the future. That without them, the balance we're looking for in the world and in our businesses can't be met. I have a question for you about what is the responsibility of the business? It hitchhikes on this last question. What kind of self-care you define today? You talked about, and I probably missed some of it, resilience, feeling pain and accepting the truth, creating safety, and we're talking here about how so much of that should happen when we're children and so on. What does a business do to help? I'm thinking about some of my bosses saying, oh, Jody, I want you to feel the pain and accept the truth. I don't get it. I don't see the picture. So what do businesses do?
Yeah.
What's the responsibility of the leadership in businesses around that issue?
So
thank you.
I think that what we're seeing is the support of the leader in me. So it comes from that, because of course you're right. Like, we have to be realistic. Like, business is business. We have a long way to go. But cutting edge, kind of some of the cutting edge conversations about the self-knowledge, right? Which is the self-knowledge, and helping people through that journey of self-knowledge. What are the things I'm really good at, and what are the things I need to improve on? Now, here's the interesting thing about some of the shifting of thinking in the self-knowledge world. For so long, like even in the women's world, in the women's leadership development, it was like, we're going to teach you skills so you can assimilate into a male-dominated leadership model, right? That's why even for everything that Sheryl Sandberg has done good, the lean in is really saying, what'd you say? Yeah. Yeah, man up. It's a kind of like man up, right? And so part of self-knowledge, part of what we're finding in the studies is that how do we help people really embrace who they are? What are they good at? What's their joy? Instead of trying to, like for me, instead of making me a better accountant, it's like putting me in places where I'm out speaking and relationship building and collaborating, right? So that's really where this is going. And then part of feeling your feeling is saying, wow, I'm in a job that isn't right for me. That's part of what it's, because you want your people to be their most authentic self. Who are you? Are you in the right company, the right job, the right place? So to have those transparent conversations, that's what we're talking about. It's okay to say to people, are you happy here? And have those conversations and help your people go towards their light. When I was at the Kennedy School, there was a woman who worked in the center, and she just didn't seem happy to me. So I pulled her in one day, and everyone said to me, don't talk to her. She's a little crazy, and she's going to take you to an HR claim because she's a little older. And I just didn't get that. I called her in. I said, I'm the new executive director. You've been here a while, and you're safe. I told her, you're totally safe. I just want to get to know you. Are you happy here? And she was dumbfounded that I would even ask. And she goes, no. I'm not treated well. I'm in a job that doesn't suit me. why are you here? Well, my husband passed away and I had 2 teenage kids, and Harvard's a good place, benefits, summers. And then I find out by asking her, she didn't have 1 PhD in music, she had 2. And she lost her job at, I forget which university in music. So I said to her, so where's your joy? Where's this? She said, teaching music. And I go, well, let's get you back to teaching music. So I gave her 6 months. We worked it out. She spent several hours a day working. And she ended up at down in Florida teaching at, I forget the university, Lynn University, with a teaching. And she comes to Boston like twice a year, and I see her. She's so happy. Now, she won, and I won, because then I had an open position to put somebody in who wanted to be in the leadership field at the Kennedy School. That's what this is about, right? And so sitting there and saying, how are you feeling? And then you have to train people to be able to have those courageous conversations, right? And that's part of it. So that's why today's conversation, I don't have all the answers, but I know what we're doing now isn't working. That's what I know. And I know that people are happy and they're their most productive selves when you can help them get to their purpose and passion. And if they're not there in your organization, help them go somewhere else. And then recruit for people who want to be in your field, in the right job. You know, Jim Collins says, right people on the bus, in the right seats. And I always tell people, it's okay if you're in the wrong seat. And it's okay if you're on the wrong bus. Like, I'm on the wrong bus in politics now. I'm done. I can't go back on a political bus. And they're in a seat I want. And that's okay. I outgrew it, right? I grew up. So it's help your people, find their passion. So,
That's great.
Yeah, great. One more question?
Hi.
Sorry.
Eric Fromm, his book, what is it, The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness, he had a great quote that ended up, destruction is the result of unlived life. And I had a chance to get in his library in Tübingen, Germany, and ran into an author, Arno Gruer, and it's the best material I've ever seen on identity. It's called The Betrayal of the Self.
Wow. Thank you. Right. I mean, what makes anyone more unhappy in life than the betrayal of their own passion? An unlived purpose and passion. That's why Viktor Frankl's work is so fascinating, because it's all human suffering and human mental illness is unlived purpose and passion. So if you got 70% of our people in the workplace dying at their desks, and we're losing $350 billion of lost productivity, what if we created a world where you helped our people get to purpose and passion, and then to had conversations about how they took care of themselves, listened to themselves, loved themselves and others? It's cutting edge stuff, but it's fascinating. We're all in this room talking about love, vulnerability, right? Caring, all of this stuff, all the feminine, masculine, bringing more feminine in. This is all, it's coming, it's bubbling up. And then you have companies like Southwest Airlines who've been living love, and they're the most profitable airline in the country. So a lot of this stuff, it ain't just soft stuff. It's the stuff that's necessary for today's worker and today's customer, and how we start to transition and start to have different models and different conversations that take people to their purpose and passion is when I think we'll have a different world. So at that, thank you so much.